Hello, this is Hammer Striker here. Today we're going to talk about doing a little bit of work on a 1022. We're going to use this 1022 charger that I've got in front of me, which we're also got an upcoming review on this, which may or may not be released before this video is. We'll link them together in either event. But this is a Ruger 1022 charger, and it's based on the Ruger 1022 action, which is quite common and used in a lot of guns. We're going to use this as an example because the 1022 action is pretty much the same everywhere it goes. But there's a very annoying little feature in the 1022 action that's relatively easy to solve, but exceptionally annoying until you do. You'll note that I have this gun is unloaded and I have the bolt locked back. On the 1022, you can't release the bolt by simply pulling back on it, nor can you release it by simply playing around with the release catch. You have to do this kind of complicated dance of holding the bolt back just right while you wiggle the release catch to just the right position. It's here where my thumb is. And you get everything just perfectly lined up and then the bolt will go forward. It's probably one of the most annoying things if you've got the bolt locked back, trying to get that just right to get it go forward. There's times you'll catch it just right, and other times you may fight with it for 30 seconds while you try to get it to go forward. Well, it's very easy to solve. There's a couple ways to do it. I've seen a couple videos out there on modifying this part that you see here. You can actually take the part that's in it and grind off a flange and accomplish this. But this particular part, Valquartsen, they're like $11 on Midway. It's very inexpensive, and this will give you just a drop-in replacement. So given the price and the convenience of having something that's ready to go and guaranteed to be machined correctly, versus going after it with a Dremel, and if you get it a little bit wrong, having other problems, this is definitely the way to go. So what I'm going to cover in this video is disassembly, replacing this part, and reassembly. And the disassembly and reassembly piece of it would be the same as if you were going to clean it or do something else with it. Now, being that this is the takedown, it does have one additional step that you have to do, which is pull back on this little lever here and remove the barrel. If this were not a takedown, then the barrel would stay attached throughout the whole process and you wouldn't have to mess with that. Now, the takedown is available like in this Ruger charger, and it's also available in a rifle style. They function the same. And also note, this Red-Dot is something that we added in the review video. We'll talk about this a little bit. And we actually do have a review on this individual Red-Dot. I've got 2 or 3 of these on different guns. I'll put a link to that video in case you're curious about this Red-Dot. But starting with, you make sure the gun's unloaded, and then you don't want to have the bolt locked back as you take it apart. So I'm going to play around with it and get it to release. It comes with this hex wrench, and there's a captive bolt here that you just loosen all the way until it's just flopping around loose. It won't come all the way out, but it'll flop around loose. And then this is one step that's kind of strange. You put the safety kind of at the halfway position, halfway between safe and ready to fire. That's so that it'll clear the stock as you pull it out. And that's pretty much true of whatever stock your 1022 action happens to be in. At this point, by the way, there's pins that are likely to fall out. There's several pins on the 1022 that are actually kind of quite loose. You'll see one right here that they just kind of slide loosely. That's not a defect, that's nothing to worry about. When it's inside the stock, whatever stock you've got it in, that's fine. But basically we want to pop these pins out. We've got this large one at the back that's part of the bolt stop. And then we've got 2 more, one here at the front and one at the back. And if they don't just slide right out, you can use any kind of a punch like this Glock tool to just give them a little push and slide them out. Now this particular gun, this front one's a little bit tight. At this point now, these 2 pins, the two top ones are identical, and the back one is obviously very much different. So it's very easy to keep track of them. You don't have to worry so much about which one was where. Once you've got the pins out, you just lift the trigger group off. Don't worry about the ejector flopping down. That's not going to hurt anything. I'm going to set that aside for just a moment. I'm going to show you how to get the bolt out of here. It can be a little bit tricky, but it's not too bad. First, you'll start with pulling the bolt all the way back using the bolt release, and then just kind of hold it back with your finger and your thumb around the frame. And it does take a little bit of wiggling to get your finger under this just right and get the bolt out. But effectively, it's going to just pop out of here. So I'm going to lift it up, and I use my finger to keep the slide guide out of the way temporarily while I pull it out. Now I've got the bolt. And I can clean it and oil it as I see fit. Also, once I release the tension, I can remove the guide rod spring and the catch bolt. If it pops off on you, you can just slide it back together. And tension should keep it together. Every once in a while, you may find it just pops apart. Don't worry about it if it does, just slide it back together. At this point, I can set this aside, and we're going to work on the actual modifications to the trigger group. Normally, for cleaning purposes, you don't have to mess with the trigger group, but we're going to do that here, pull a couple more pins out so that we can replace the part. The part that we're going to replace is right in here, and it's real hard to see it, and you'll see it kind of goes down that way. This is the part we're going to replace. So there's two pins that hold it in place. One here and one down here. And there's a spring right here that's attached behind this pin. That spring will pop up, so just be aware of it. Hold your finger over it. So basically, we're just going to pull these two pins out. And the other one, because it's under spring tension, you need to use a punch like this Glock tool. And I just put my finger here, so as I push it through, I'll catch that spring. You just pop it out and let the spring pop up. And now I've got both pins out. At this point, you can remove the ejector and just set it aside. And then you can wiggle the slide catch out of its position. And effectively what you're going to do is you're just going to kind of move it around with your fingers until you get it just right where it'll slide out. It does tend to have a tendency to want to get caught in there, and it does sometimes take a little playing with, but effectively just move things around until it frees up. You shouldn't have to use any force, you shouldn't have to pry it, just wiggle things around until it catches free. This is the original part, and I'm going to compare it to the replacement part. And if I turn them in the same orientation, what you'll see is right here on the original part, there's kind of a heart shape right there, right at the end of my finger. And on the replacement part, that heart is gone, it's just open. This heart is responsible for all that annoyance, this little protrusion down here. And yes, you can take a Dremel tool and you can grind that off and you can get it, till it's totally open and it'll work perfectly. But it's a lot of work and a lot of hassle for $11 worth of parts. The replacement is simply set the annoying part aside, and we're just going to slide the new part in. Now, the way this thing goes in, if I'm holding the trigger group in my hand with the hammer at the back and the breech face at the front, it's going to go in like this. It kind of sits in kind of like this. So we're going to actually a little bit more like that. So we're going to drop it down into place, guiding it around the magazine catch, and just drop it down in. Now, one of the things you want to make sure of is that the spring is up at this point, which I didn't have it up, because you want the spring to sit, one leg of the spring right down, you can see it right here. One leg of the spring down there sits on that pin, and that's what gives it the tension. At this point, take the pin that you popped out and hold the spring down with your finger or whatever you can want to hold it down with. Slide the pin in just enough to catch the spring. So it's got the spring caught. And then take your ejector, and it should face forward like this, because it's going to sit down into that slot, and just hook it on that pin. Push the pin forward, and then make sure right here, I'm just going to pull the ejector out of the way, you'll see that there's a hole cut in the new slide catch. You need to make sure that that hole, that the pin actually goes through that hole and actually captures that. And you may have to wiggle it around a little bit. Of course, it's easier to do than it looks, because if you're just doing it, you're not trying to show it on camera. I'm just going to do it. There we go. So I've got it through there, and then I'm just going to push the pin all the way through. And now the ejector goes forward, and the pin is through the piece, and you see if I can bring it up, it comes up flush, so it's ready to go. Now to install the other pin. Now the other pin is a little bit more fun, because the pin has to go through the mag catch as well as through the slide catch. So effectively what you're going to need to do is line all those pieces up. And you can do it with the pin, and sometimes when you do it you'll get lucky on the first try. But it's a lot easier to take something like a punch, which is smaller than the pin, gives you a little bit of wiggle room, and use the punch to go through first. That lines everything up, and you should be able to see that this is kind of springy, it's got tension on it. I push it, it releases. This rocks like it should, so I can tell that I've got all the things caught that I need. Then just take the pin and use the pin to chase the punch back out, using a little bit of tension on the punch as you do it. And that little trick will help you line these things up, where if you're putting the pin through that's the exact size of the hole, it's a lot more difficult to get it right on the first try. But at this point we have now modified the bolt release and removed that annoying little feature. Now it's just a matter of reassembling it. And of course this is a once and done thing, as far as, once you've done this you don't have to mess with it again. But I'll go through the assembly process that would also be true if you were cleaning it. So we're going to put the bolt back into the frame. So you take this part, slide it in place. Yeah, mine popped off again. Let me fix that real quick. Slide the bolt back into place, and it should line up sitting on this little protrusion at the back. And you can see how I've got it in there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick my finger in there and I'm going to grab it right about here and use my finger to guide it all the way back straight. And I'm going to catch it just like I did before, with my thumb, my finger on it, and my hand around the frame, and now I've got it all the way back. Then I'm going to take the bolt, and you need to drop the bolt in kind of nose first a little bit, and then press down on it with your finger, and then let off on this catch a little bit, and you'll feel it snap into place. And now the bolt's back in place, and I can verify smooth function. It's not difficult to do. It's just one of those things that's kind of tricky. The first couple times you do it, it may take you several minutes to get it right. After you've done it a couple times, it's a matter of feel. You can feel when it's right and ready to drop right back into place. At this point now, we need to simply put the trigger group back onto this, and it's easiest to do that with the trigger group upright and bring the frame down on top. Otherwise that ejector wants to kind of flop out of the way. And then you just line it up till it's lined up, put your pins back in. Now as you put the pins back in, remember they're going to want to fall out, so you kind of want to use your hand or something like that to hold them in place. And sometimes you have to wiggle the trigger group around a little bit to get the pin to line up, or try it from the other side. There you go. So now I've got the back pin in. There's no real left or right on this, even though you may find that on some guns it goes in easier one way than the other. For example, on this particular one, and we've got two other 1022 actions that don't do this, on this particular one, the front pin is much easier to put in from the right side and bring it across, rather than trying to put it in from the left side. There's no particular rule. It's really just if you've got one that's got a little bit more, paint or whatever in the hole, or the specs are just a hair different, you can find it's easier one way or the other. At this point now I have a fully reassembled 1022 action with the pins, of course, scrolling around. I want to put this now back into the frame. So I'm going to grab the stock and make sure the pins are lined up and keep it upright. If you tilt it on its side, these pins are going to drop out on you. So keep it upright. Make sure that the safety is in that half safe position if you'd moved it. And simply drop it back in. Make sure your pins don't get out of the way. And it should just drop right back in. So it's just a case of wiggling it right in. It should fit fairly easily. Every once in a while when you go to put it in, the back will want to catch a little bit. You may have to just kind of rock it a little bit. But you shouldn't have to force it, shouldn't have to pound it. And if you kept track of the pins as you were dropping it in, they'll all be in there and everything will be the way it needs to do. And then just grab it, flip it over, tighten the screw down. It should tighten, by the way, very easily. You notice I'm just doing it by brushing fingers. Make sure that if it's difficult to do, you may be cross-threading. Back it off, get it right, because it should go in up till it snugs up, and then just take and give it like just a little snug. You're not tightening this thing for eternity, and I'm just kind of using my fingers on the end. I'm not grabbing it or putting a lot of torque on it, just what torque I can do with my fingertips. And at this point now, I have a working action, and if I do lock the slide back, or the bolt back, I can release it by simply pulling back and letting go, like any other gun or rifle that's out there. So this change makes operating the bolt a whole lot easier and a whole lot nicer, and makes it work like every other one out there. Now if you happen to have a Takedown model, you're going to want to lock it back and place the barrel assembly, line up the barrel kind of at an angle like this, and lock it in place. And now I have successfully reassembled it. Now one of the things that I'll show you is the lever I've been using is kind of a little bit difficult to see. It's kind of back here. This is the magazine release right here, this long protrusion, and this little metal piece is the bolt catch. So when I'm wanting to lock it back, I pull the bolt back and just push in on that, let go of the bolt and let go of it, it locks back in place. If you haven't made this modification to release it, you have to pull the bolt back and wiggle this around till you get it just right, and then the bolt will go forward. With the modification in place, you don't touch this at all to release the bolt. Simply pull back and let go. So I've kind of come to the conclusion that if every time I get a 1022, whatever stock it's in, whatever configuration it's in, I'm going to place an order for one of these. And if I know in advance I want to get the 1022, then I'll have this on its way. Because it's fairly easy to do it the first time that you take it apart. You get it home, you got to take it apart, clean it, and oil it. So while you got it apart to clean it and oil it, you go a couple steps further, put this thing in, eliminate that hassle before you go to the range the first time, and really get to enjoy the gun properly. So hopefully that was helpful, and if you like our videos, give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, check us out on Facebook, and have a great day. Thank you.